course is the most beautiful racetrack in America, hands down.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you to the breeding stock sale. Book one. Good to have you back with us.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome into the Friday night edition of the Keeneland Look Ahead for the 35th time this year. I'm Jeremy Plonk from Horse Player Now. Happy to join you for some handicapping exercises for tomorrow's card at Keeneland. Of course, tomorrow, the season finale, if you will, the Breeders' Cup championship program. We've got 9 championship races surrounded by 3 other races, 2 on the undercard, and then a supporting stakes in race number 12. So a 12-race card getting underway at 10:30 a.m. Eastern on Saturday at Keeneland. As you know, here on the Keeneland Look Ahead, we're going to take you through the full card and give you our handicapping thoughts, but also our strategy on how to attack the card. That's as important as anything. 5,000 of you tuned in for last night's show. I'm really proud of that number, especially we were going up against the World Series, the NFL game between the Eagles and the Houston Texans. Kentucky basketball had a home game. Louisville basketball had a home game. So a nice crowd last night. Hopefully, again, you got something out of last night's show, and we had a decent handicapping today. So hopefully you took a little bit out of that last night and put that to your personal success. That's what it's all about. We want you to be more confident when you play the races. And Saturday at Keeneland, what a day to play the races. I mean, Kentucky Derby Day has massive pools, and there's the intrigue for the one race, but there is no better betting day throughout the course of an entire afternoon than what we'll see tomorrow with the championship races at Keeneland. There is a little rain in the forecast, WLKY in Kentucky TV station there. You know, I think the last forecast I saw was looking at, 20-30% chance of showers, scattered showers for tomorrow. So there could be some rain in the forecast, but I don't think we're going to see a major change in the course conditions or track conditions based on what we saw today. But of course, you want to keep up with all that. Check out the Keeneland.com website. They'll have updated track conditions for you in the morning. Of course, all the scratches and changes, all the course maintenance that was done and all that is all public knowledge. So Keeneland does a great job of getting that info out. And of course, check, any of your favorite weather apps out there to see how the conditions might play out tomorrow. But we're going to handicap like we're expecting things to be, fast on the main and firm on the turf, if not good on the turf. And should be an excellent day for racing. Now, what we saw on the track today, we'll recap quickly. Hopefully, it'll help you look ahead to tomorrow. On the turf, the Europeans dominated. The Euros won all 3 grass races of the 5 races on Breeders' Cup Day. 3 were on grass, all 3 won by the Europeans. And really, it's more focused than that. It was Charlie Appleby and Aidan O'Brien, and they ran 1-2 in a couple of the events as well. So the Godolphin and Coolmore clan, they've got the top horses in Europe. They brought what they thought could win here, and they did very, very well on Future Stars Friday. Now, of course, it was all 2-year-old racing, and on the main track, it was about the locals. I mean, the Keeneland horses really held their own. In fact, they excelled on Future Stars Friday. The winner of the Alcibiades, Wonder Wheel, came back. She won the Juvenile Fillies. And the winner of our local Breeders' Futurity came back and won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile in an upset over Cave Rock. Let's give you a chance to see just a little more highlights, if you will, of what we saw on the track today. Let's go back to the Juvenile Fillies and the call from Larry Colmus on NBC.
Chocolate Gelato's going to come wide. Atomically is in behind horses, and Wonder Wheel is getting going, and she swings up on the outside, full of run. Wonder Wheel comes charging up on the outside as they arrive at the final 16th. She takes command, and Wonder Wheel and Tyler Gaffleon gets his first Breeders' Cup win, and he races with weapon victory. Wonder Wheel and a jubilant Tyler Gaffleon have done it in the Juvenile Fillies.
One of the big takeaways from Wonder Wheel's victory is Don't get too caught up on a horse's running style, because we thought Wonder Wheel, the wire-to-wire winner of the Alcibiades, had an easy trip that day and she would be vulnerable in this spot. The fact that she was able to take back and come from off the pace changed those dynamics altogether, and it was a smart move. Tyler Gaffalione, one of his 2 wins on the card today. As for the other riders who had doubles, Ryan Moore, the English rider, and Irad Ortiz Jr. So 3 riders had a double today. One of those, again, Tyler Gaffalione there. Juvenile fillies. Now let's go to the juvenile, where all eyes were on Cave Rock, a heavy favorite for Bob Baffert. Baffert had an odds-on favorite beaten on the undercard as well. Would Cave Rock get over to the top? You know by now, he did not.
Forte has come under a ride now. He's 5 lengths off the lead, being asked for more run, but he is picking up his stride, and he's going 3 wide, and he's coming up on the outside of National Treasure, and he's coming up after Cave Rock as they turn for home. Cave Rock cuts the corner. Forte on the outside. National Treasure between them. Verifying is next. Cave Rock is taken on here by Forte. The 2 of them coming down to the wire. Forte on the outside. Cave Rock along the rail. And Forte has upset Cave Rock to win the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Then it was National Treasure and Verifying. Forte and Irad Ortiz have done it in the Juvenile.
Irad Ortiz and Forte winning the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Forte, of course, won that Breeders' Futurity in just a throwdown. It looked to me as a race handicapper and as somebody who studies a lot of video that maybe the Breeders' Futurity was too hard of a prep. He really had a long 3-furlong throwdown with a horse named Loggins in that race in the Breeders' Futurity. Thought it might knock him out. I was dead wrong on the 2-year-old there. Forte, stronger, tougher, a little more iron about him than maybe this guy thought he had going into the juvenile. Congrats, and now he moves on as one of the winner book favorites towards this year's Kentucky Derby. Now, today we have 3 races that had daily doubles going from Friday to Saturday. Even if you're not alive in those daily doubles, if you didn't have the juvenile turf winner, if you didn't have the Distaff or the juvenile winner or the juvenile fillies, the betting in those races already gives us some indication of what we can expect on Saturday. And I think that's the takeaway and what's important. The juvenile fillies, the race that we saw Wonder Wheel win, goes to the Distaff. And in the Distaff betting tomorrow, the favorite is pretty solid with Nest. She's favored over Malathought. If you thought those two might be about even on the tote board, the daily double wagering today to tomorrow gives you a solid indication that Nest is going to be a little more solidly favored than maybe expected. Then Malathought was a second choice. Clairiere was third choice in that wagering. And a horse we'll talk about a little bit later, Society, a pretty distant fourth selection in there. So that gives us some sense of what might happen in the wagering when we get to the Distaff tomorrow. The other multi-race wager bet to talk about was the Juvenile, of course, the one we saw. Cave Rock was upset. The Juvenile and the Classic were the 2 races tied together in the 2-day double. Get this, folks. The double from Cave Rock to Flightline for $2 was paying $3.88. It didn't happen with the upset, and now the double with Forte pays in the $24, $25 range going to Flightline. He is very solidly favored in the Classic, as you might expect. The horse who was second choice in the Classic betting was the 6, that being Epicenter. Fairly clear second choice. And then Life is Good was the third choice amongst the daily double bettors. So when we get to the Classic tomorrow, if you were thinking about Epicenter and you think you might get like an overlay price, the doubles tell you he's going to be the second favorite in the race, and Flightline is going to be very heavily favored. So with a heavy favorite at 2 or 3 to 5, maybe the second choice in the race is 3 to 1, 7 to 2, something like that. That might be the price if you're looking ahead to bet Epicenter tomorrow. And that's what we can glean by looking at the money in the daily double pools. The final multi-race daily double to tell you about was the Juvenile Turf today, won in the final race. Aidan O'Brien up the inside with the victory there. Victoria Road, the winner, pairing that one to the Breeders' Cup Turf. So what can that tell us about the odds for the Breeders' Cup Turf? The 7-horse Nation's Pride is favored in the daily double bets. The 2-horse Warlike Goddess, the filly, she's the second choice. Rebels Romance, who is the 3 to 1 morning line favorite for the Breeders' Cup Turf, is third choice in the multi-race daily doubles. That's money already in the pool, and that's significant money already in the pool. So I think that is more telling than an odds maker's prediction, any odds maker's prediction on a morning line. So the morning line looks like it's going to get flipped around in the Breeders' Cup turf. It's Charlie Appleby still with the favorite, but not with the one that's morning line favorite. Rebels Romance is the third choice, but Nation's Pride, the other Appleby, is currently the favorite, not currently, is the favorite amongst daily double players looking ahead to tomorrow. So that's a little bit of a recap of what we saw on Friday. Track was very fair. I would not glean anything out of the running styles. We saw horses win on the lead. We saw some closers. We saw some races where speed and closers hit the wire together. Main track looks fair. Check the conditions tomorrow. The wind could be a factor tomorrow. Flags to the left generally favor speed. They get a tailwind down the backstretch. Flags to the right are going to make speed horses run into the wind down to the backstretch and give closers a chance. So if we get a high wind today, there are predictions upwards of 20-mile-per-hour winds tomorrow at Keeneland. If it's a high wind day, again, flags to the left would favor speed. Flags to the right would give horses from off the pace a more realistic chance of catching up and winning. Okay, let's get to handicapping now on this Saturday card. We've got 12 races to go through. We won't spend a ton of time on every one of the races, some more than others. But as you know, if you follow the Keeneland Look Ahead, I'm going to give you the big picture of tomorrow's card. There are 12 races, so there is a lot on this menu in terms of wagering. It's not just the standard early and late pick fours and pick fives. Almost every race you see a multi-race wager starting anew. If you've never seen the show before, a lot of new faces, I'm sure, checking in. Race number 1, where I have P5, that means a pick 5 starts in race number 1. That'll be races 1 through 5. A pick 4 starts in race number 2. And then there's another pick 5 starting right away in race number 3, because that's where the Breeders' Cup races start with the filly and mare sprint. All the Breeders' Cup races are abbreviated in purple, so you can see how they line up. And instead of a turf pick 3, which we're used to seeing at Keeneland, there's a special Breeders' Cup turf pick 4 on the card. The 4 turf races, part of the Breeders' Cup tomorrow, a special pick 4. They're marked off in green. Of course, there'll be races 4, 6, 8, and 10. The turf sprint, the filly mare turf, the mile, and the turf. So if you like to play multi-race wagers, there is one rolling on pretty much every race as the card goes with the overlapping bets. Some races, you like, for instance, the pick 5 that starts races 1 through 5. There's also a pick 5 that starts in races 3 through 7. So there are going to be races like 3, 4, and 5 that overlap in the early pick 5 and that middle pick 5. So races 3, 4, and 5, if you have a strong opinion on this card, you can try to leverage them in not only one pick 5 bet, but 2 of them. So put a little extra time into those races that overlap. I like to call them swing races on a regular day. A lot of times on a 9-race card, for instance, the 5th in the middle will be a swing race in both early and late pick 4s and pick 5s. So we've got a lot of races that overlap. Map out your schedule. This is a very interesting and loaded betting day in terms of races and bets that you can go after on Breeders' Cup Day. You don't have to bet them all, and chances are you can't bet them all. But what you want to do is find the ones, match them up where there's a good offered bet and you have a strong opinion. Always bet when you have an opinion. When you don't have an opinion, take the trip to El Paso, as Harvey Pack used to say. You don't have to bet them all. You only have to hit the ones that are going to count for you. So that's what we're going to try to do. 3 key plays for me on the card, as we always show you here on the Keeneland Look Ahead. For me, we're on the turf sprint in race number 4. You know, I've told you about this angle for years at Keeneland on turf sprints. When we got a big field of horses, post 3, 4, and 5 have a major statistical advantage, a huge ROI on return. And I'll be darned if we didn't have the 5, 4, 3 trifecta come in. Just an ice cold power post trifecta today in the juvenile turf sprint, paid 340 to 1 on the odds. So it wasn't like it was chalk, chalk, chalk. I mean, these posts have a real advantage. It's tough down on the inside, post 1 and 2 in full field turf sprints. It's hard for the outside post horses. So again, take advantage of that today. Hopefully you did in the juvenile turf sprint. But for my key plays, let's see if we can't go back to back with some power post magic there in race number 4 on Saturday, where the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint will be the second of the Breeders' Cup races offered. Race number 5 in the Dirt Mile. This is a race where there's a big statistical advantage for the horses to the inside, post 1 through 4. These are horses that could be offered at pretty nice prices in the Dirt Mile. So this could be a key play of the day because you get advantageous posts at big prices. That's what we're looking to try to score. And then on the final play of the day, as far as my key plays go, I told you I liked Society in the Distaff coming up late. She's going to be my key anchor to any plays later in the day in race number 9. I think she's got a big pace advantage and it's the potential to go wire to wire. So that's a look at how the card lines up over the course of 12 races. Very unique to get a 12 race card at Keeneland. Again, all these overlapping wagers and stuff. Make yourself a list, something like this. You scratch out the race, the number, and like where the wagers start, and that's kind of like the big picture, what I just put up on the screen, but have that to follow throughout the day so you can kind of figure out where your bets are and where they might line up. That's very important on Breeders' Cup Day. Be organized. It seems like a lot of time between races, like with 40 minutes between posts, but the post-race ceremonies, the pomp and circumstance that goes with it, these races will be just coming at you fast and furious really throughout the whole day when you think about 12 of them, one after the other. And heaven forbid you're playing some simulcast somewhere else at the same time and you're trying to sneak a play in here or there. Do your homework ahead of time. That's the moral of the story, because that time between race is going to crunch up on you a little bit. Now, as well as the big picture that we like to show you on these episodes of the Keeneland Look Ahead, the other thing we do is take you to Keeneland.com for the handicapper selectors box. And this is where the 5 public handicappers who do Keeneland every day, myself in the middle, Scott Hazelton and Gabby Gaudet, who you see on the simulcast feed, Tom Leach from Keeneland Select, and Kim Nelson, a Keeneland handicapper for a long time. Our veteran group puts out our picks each day for the Keeneland races. We've done it as well for the Breeders' Cup races on Saturday. I like to show this handicapper selectors box. People who watch this show know I say it every night, so you're probably sick of it, but it's not just to see who I like or who Scott or Gabby likes in a particular race and go with those picks. This gives you a sense of races that are wide open, because let's say 5 of us have 5 different horses picked on top, and we've seen that many times. Those are the wide open races, right? If you can't find 5 people who agree on even the same horse once, then a race is wide open, and it could be a race that sets up for a price player or one that you want to spread and use a lot of horses for. On the other hand, if you go down to race 11 and you see Flightline, I know that's an obvious example because Flightline's so well known and he's going to be a 2 to 5 shot. But in that case where you see everybody agreeing, that a horse is going to get bet. And we had a real example of that today. In the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies, we were all on the same Brad Cox horse, the runner-up in the Alcibiades, and she ended up getting bet to favoritism and just did not run a lick. She didn't like the dirt in her face again. She looks like a turf horse. I thought she climbed early in that race in the Alcibiades, and then today she did the same thing again. So look for her back on the turf. But the idea was that, I thought, okay, we got 4 to 1 in the morning line. And then when we went and we looked at the box last night, it was like, everybody had the same horse. If we're all thinking the same thing, chances are the general public's in the same way. So that's a way that you can look at this box and try to figure out for yourself, okay, where's the money going to go? Where are we going to have the wide open races? This is at Keeneland.com in the handicappers consensus area. There's an easy button where you can click and get a printable version of this and print it out. So it's good to keep and follow along throughout the course of the day, and also in your advanced handicapping. And also, too, it's always good with handicappers that you trust and respect. They see something maybe you didn't, and this can kind of alert you to that, where you say, why does so-and-so have this horse picked on top? Makes you get back into the past performances and see if you didn't miss something. And that's what it's all about when we handicap together, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, let's get handicapping. Enough set time here. Let's get into race number 1 on this Saturday card. They are maiden special weights going 7 furlongs on the main, a big purse of $150,000. So that's going to lure out-of-town people to come in and run in allowance races, and you want to be in the big races for some of these barns on a huge day like Breeders' Cup. And that's why we have Arabian Night in here. This is the same connections as Medina Spirit, John Velasquez, Zidane Stables, and Bob Baffert. Now, Arabian Night, a $2.3 million purchase as a 2-year-old in April at the Ocala sale. This horse is supposed to be ready-made and supposed to be right off the bat, right? 2-year-olds itself for that kind of money in April are supposed to win early and win right out of the box. This is the first career start. We're already to November 5th, so that might tell you something right away. Arabian Night didn't make it to Del Mar, and Bob Baffert's best 2-year-olds make it to Del Mar. Remember, Cave Rock just just ran second today in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And this horse is behind on time, Arabian Night, but has to be respected. But Bob Baffert had the big favorite earlier on the card in a Lowndes Company with 2-year-olds on Friday, and he got knocked off by a Brad Cox horse who just ran right by him. I think we could have the same scenario here in race number 1. Brad Cox has Rocket and Roll. This is a really nice a well-bred horse, half to a couple different runners that have had success. $675,000 purchase. I think Rocket and Roll under Joel Rosario, they might be able to pull the same move that was done today on the undercard in a Lowndes Company, where the Cox runner just blew past Baffert in the stretch. I'm looking for Rocket and Roll in race number 1. And Bob didn't have a great day, that's for sure. I mean, he lost on a couple odds on favorites. His turf sprinter didn't run well at all. So if you're going to take Baffert at 3-5 or 2-5 on Arabian Night in this spot after what happened today, more power to you, but I'm going to take a shot against him. And these picks actually were made 2 days ago before we saw how the Baffert runners ran today. So it actually gives me more confidence. Looking across, Arabian Night, top pick for Tom and Kim Nelson. A couple of us are going to take some shots, though, with different horses. So if you're going to try to beat Baffert, there are a few different ways to go about it. Fashion King and Reagan, also horses picked there by my fellow cohorts. But I'm going to try to see if we can't get deja vu with the 2-year-olds today. Brad Cox outrunning Bob Baffert. Let's go Rocket and Roll in race number 1. Now, I told you I was going to take a stand against the Baffert in race number 1. I've got him on top in race number 2, though, and that's Messier. And as we get back to the big picture, remember, race number 2 here on the undercard is going to start the early pick 4. So race number 2, races 2, 3, 4, and 5, which include 3 Breeders' Cup races after this, will be in a pick 4. So if you've got a strong opinion in race number 2 and you want to work it into the Breeders' Cup, that early pick 4 starting here could be a juicy place to do it, because Turf Sprint's going to have a big field. Obviously, the Dirt Mile, maybe not as wide open as once thought a couple weeks ago. The Filly and Mare Turf, though, certainly in race number 6 is going to be an open contest. So early pick 4 is not a bad chance to take here starting in race number 2 if you have an opinion. Messier is a horse who was trained up to the Triple Crown. He ran in the Kentucky Derby. He's got a lot of class, but he was fast right out of the box. I would expect Messier comes back ready to run in race number 2, and I think he's going to be tough in here. John Velasquez again in the saddle, and this is a horse who sprinted the first 2 races of his career. Second out, just won really nicely at 6 furlongs at Santa Anita. I think he'll be ready to run off the works, and Messier's the top choice in for me. But if it's not Messier and the Bafferts are just simply not firing as well as expected, then maybe the 6, Long Range Toddy, a horse who arguably could have been in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. He's coming off a good second in the Phoenix, the local prep at Keeneland for the Sprint. Long Range Toddy with jockey Luis Saez, who finished the fall meet so strongly. Saez picked up 2 wins on the card today. Certainly Long Range Toddy, if you don't want to play the Baffert horse in here, could be mixed in for sure in your multi-race bets. I thought this was a race where you could also use Nakatomi. 2 or 3 deep, I think at least. You certainly wouldn't want a single Messier. He's my top pick, but I feel less good about him today than I would have, say, 24 hours ago. Now let's get going to the Breeders' Cup. And the big picture tells us the race number 3, the Filly and Mare Sprint, is going to start the early pick 5 for the Breeders' Cup races. The early pick 5 will be races 3 through 7 on the Breeders' Cup schedule. And this is a good one. We've got last year's defending champ CC back. You've got Goodnight Olive, who's been an absolute buzzsaw, winning 5 in a row. A good-looking group in here. Obligatory is kind of the pace play in this race, and I see that Tom and Scott went all the way on the pace play, going with Obligatory from far off the pace. She's going to be the deep closer. If there's one race on this Saturday card for the Breeders' Cup that looks like it could melt down for a big closer, it's the Filly and Mare Sprint. There is a lot of early speed in this race, and frankly, somebody from far off of it could make some big hay in here. When the post position draw came out and the inside 2 horses were among the 2 fastest in this race, that told you that we were going to get a hot pace. And there are other horses who are very, very fast. Slammed is in the rail. Edgeway's in the 2 hole. These are horses that are definitely capable of making the lead. They're going to have to gun from the inside. Now, as good as the horses from Keeneland ran today on the main track, the 2 stakes races won. The Juvenile and the Juvenile Fillies won by horses who prepped at Keeneland. That's a good sign for the quality of the fall meet and the preps and everything that goes into it. Staying at home, right? You prepped, you stayed here. You didn't have to travel around. A horse settles in nicely. Slammed won the local prep for this, the Thoroughbred Club of America Stakes, and she did it impressively by 6.5 lengths. Is she going to be able to sustain over 7 furlongs? That's the question with Slammed. She's very talented, but there is a ton of early speed in this race, even with the scratch of Hot Peppers. Hot Peppers comes out of this race, would have been yet another 5th or 6th horse battling for the lead, but I still think there's plenty of pace in here. Now, the 2 horses I have on top, CC and Goodnight Olive, both stalk from mid-pack. I think they're going to get the great run of this race. They're going to come from, say, 5th, 6th, 7th, and then this race is just going to flip at some point, I think, where the speed horses start to back up. The horses from off the pace take over. And I think CC and Goodnight Olive have the early run on Obligatory, who's going to be coming from farther back. And if this race really melts down, then Obligatory could get up all the way to the victory. But if not, then I think the horses who get the first overrun, and they may be the 2 best horses in the race anyway, CC and Goodnight Olive, they get the trip. When the best horses in a race also get the best setup in a race, it's very difficult to look past them, right? It's when the best horses in the race don't get the right setup, there's too much speed or there's not enough speed, then that's when you might want to take a shot against them. But I like CC. I like the way she's training. Her races on the dirt away from Saratoga have been outstanding. Draw a line through her Saratoga form, and her sprint races in the U.S. have just been outstanding. I think she's as good as last year. I think CC will be a better price than Goodnight Olive. I think Goodnight Olive is going to get bet hard in here. And so the sense here for me is you're getting 2 very talented horses that get the setup, and the better price of the 2 is the filly who won this race last year. So take my chances with CC to repeat and become the 2nd filly to go back-to-back in this race. And it's been a while since Groupie Doll. What was that, 2012, 2013, something like that. But I think she can do it. CC for me in race number 3. Back to the big picture as we go to race number 4. This starts the turf pick 4 you see in green. Again, 4 turf races at the Breeders' Cup, all part of a special pick 4. The races 4, 6, 8, and 10. That'll start here in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. And we also have another pick 4 starting up in this particular spot. Now, as you go to my selections here, you're going to see that I had a long shot look at Bran. But news broke today that Bran will be scratched. So those picks will be updated tomorrow. But right now, we take Bran out. This could be fortuitous because I was not smart enough to take the power post on top with Emirati Anna. She's in the 3-hole at a big price. I had her pick 2nd as a long shot to put in here. Now she probably becomes the top pick. In fact, she will become my top pick with the scratch of Bran. Again, we told you post 3, 4, and 5 have a real statistical advantage, and they pay boxcar numbers on average. And so you've just got to stick with it. Now, Emirati Anna is not a win machine by any stretch. She's lost 7 races in a row. That's why I was a little bit leery about putting her on top, but I think she's got a great post draw. She was 4th in this race last year, and the horses that she's run against in 2022, a much stronger class in Europe than which he had faced last year before finishing 4th in this race. So I'm taking my shot. Emirati Anna, she's owned by Godolphin. She's not trained by Charlie Appleby. And the Godolphins trained by Appleby are the ones, obviously are clicking all over the place and winning here in the Breeders' Cup. I think Charlie Appleby's now something like 7 for 14 or 7 for 15 in the Breeders' Cup career. It's unbelievable after a couple wins again, or with 1 win here today. But I think Emirati Anna's got a great post position in the 3-hole. Again, she was 4th in this race last year at Del Mar. This race might play a little bit better to her in terms of the course because at Del Mar, much firmer kind of ground out there than we get at Keeneland this time of year, even with the nice weather that we had. So it might play a little more Euro here than at Del Mar, the way the length of the grass and all that. So I think Emirati Anna, a really interesting horse, 20-1 in the morning line. And look, the power post 3, 4, and 5. You got Emirati Anna in the 3, Campanelli in the 4, which is Wesley Ward, and then another long shot, the 5, Go Bears Go, in from Europe. A couple of handicappers I know and follow European races are a little more bullish on Go Bears Go than I am, and maybe I should be moving Go Bears Go up a little bit. But Campanelli in the 4-hole certainly has to be respected. That's Wesley Ward. No trainer has had even close to the success on turf sprinting at Keeneland as Wesley Ward. He's got 30-some victories over the last 8, 10 years. No other trainer has more than 7 at Keeneland. It's like 35-7. It's a crazy spread. Wesley Ward dominates the turf sprints here. So he's obviously got Golden Pal, the defending champion in this race. 3 of my handicappers take Golden Pal on top. I'm trying to beat Golden Pal in here. I don't think he's quite as good as he was last year, but there's not that much early speed in this year's Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. So Golden Pal, his big weapon is to break 2 lengths in front of the field. You saw what he did at Del Mar last year. It was just immaculate, the way he got out of the starting gate. If he does that again, he's going to be very tough to beat. We will know in the first 30 yards probably of the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint whether or not you got a chance to beat Golden Pal. If he breaks and he's 2 in front, it's to the next race. If he breaks and there's somebody kind of on an outside shoulder or an inside shoulder and he's not clearing the field, then I think we've got a real chance for an upset in there. So I'm going to take my chances. I love the power post, as you know, 3, 4, and 5. Maybe the other Wesley Ward. Everybody's looking at Golden Pal, but what about the 4, Campanelli, the filly in there? She's world-class as well. I believe Campanelli will move up and be in my top 3 when I get rid of Bran after the scratch. And then certainly, again, Go Bears Go, the 5, you can certainly throw in at a big number and a price. But Emirati Anna, 20-1, 4th in this race last year. It's going to be my upset pick in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. 5th race on the card, and we go back to the big picture to show you that it's the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, and multi-race bettors will be rooting in this race for sure, but there's nothing starting in this race. In race number 5, it's really the only race on the first 8, 9 races on the card that don't start, a pick 4, a pick 5, or the pick 6. So Dirt Mile here in race number 5. Big scratch in here. Laurel River is out. Tough day for Bob Baffert. Laurel River was a vet scratch today for tomorrow's races. Laurel River, I'm certain, would have been bet to favoritism in the Dirt Mile. He's now out of the race. So that changes things up and puts a lot more emphasis, obviously, on the red-hot Cody's Wish, who's won a bunch in a row around 1 turn. But in the Dirt Mile, without Laurel River, that's kind of part of, Baffert beaten with 2 really short prices. His Turf Sprint horse didn't run well today. And then the scratch of Laurel River, things have not gone right for him to this point. We'll see what shakes out here in the Dirt Mile in the absence of Laurel River. So my handicapping cohorts will be updating their picks, I'm sure. Laurel River, as you see, a top pick for a couple. I had Laurel River picked in 3rd. Now it becomes a case of maybe your prices on the horses you want aren't going to be as good, right? Laurel River was going to take a lot of money. And without Laurel River in the race, the horses that you like were probably going to get some of that cash that would have went to the favorite now. So I had an upset look in here to simplification. And as you see on my key plays of the day, we had the power post in race number 4 that we want to try to take advantage of. And in race number 5, I wanted to get after this Dirt Mile race. That's because the inside 4 post positions absolutely dominate the Dirt Mile races at Keeneland. We didn't have any Dirt Miles run during the fall meet this year. Kind of odd that we didn't, but we've had plenty of them going back to 2015 when that race was first instituted to get ready for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile when Keeneland hosted its first of now 3 Breeders' Cups. So the Dirt Mile's been run often enough. We know that the numbers there's enough in the numbers to tell you post 1, 2, 3, and 4 just have an outstanding advantage in these Dirt Mile races at Keeneland. That was one of the reasons why I want to take a little swing against Laurel River and try to find something inside, because I knew he was going to take a lot of money and he was drawn a little further out. But without Laurel River in there, I still like simplification. He's still my upset pick to win this race. But where we might have gotten 12 or 15 to 1 on simplification with Laurel River in the race, we might be looking at 6 or 8 to 1 now. And that's still attractive, but not as attractive. But I like the race for simplification for this reason. He was beaten ahead in the Pennsylvania Derby by Cyberknife. Cyberknife is going to be the second choice in this race. The favorite's going to be Cody's Wish. Cyberknife is going to be the second choice in this race. And his simplification is going to be a much, much bigger price. And he was only beaten ahead last time. This is a horse who's got a great post position to take advantage in the 2-hole. And that's where I'm leaning with simplification. Cody's Wish is a horse who's going to be very easy to root for. He's named for a young man who's had a lot of health problems, and this is kind of the inspirational horse. And for Cody's Wish to win this race, everybody at Keeneland and everybody watching on the NBC broadcast is going to be really happy to see it. If you're betting Cody's Wish, the knock on the horse and his resume is the fact that all of his good work has been done around 1 turn. He's 0 for 2 around 2 turns. So do you want to take what is now going to be a favorite in a Breeders' Cup race to do something that he hasn't done before, win around 2 turns? From a gambling standpoint, that's a no. From a rooting interest, absolutely would love to see Cody's Wish win this race. And There won't be a dry eye in the grandstand if that happens, if Cody Swish wins this race. But again, he's 0 for 2 around 2 turns. He's had a little bit of trouble getting out of the gate as well. So we'll see how that shakes out going the dirt mile. Pretty short run into the first turn. If Cody Swish has some trouble getting out of the gate, you look down, fractious, bobbled at the start, off slow, shuffled back, off bit slow. You got 4 or 5 gate trouble lines in the last, 10 career starts for Cody Swish. So to take a short price on him, not recommended, but he certainly could win this race. He's been fantastic around 1 turn. We'll see if he does it around 2 turns. Another one for the Godolphin Blue here. This one trained in the States, of course, by Bill Mott, but Cody Swish certainly a big-time player in here. But this is a race that we thought Jack Christopher would be favored a couple days ago. He didn't end up entering the race because of Chad Brown's feeling that he wouldn't pass the vet exam. Bob Baffert's horse in here, Laurel River, then assumed favoritism, and he was scratched today for failure to complete the vet exam. So we're on to our 3rd favorite in like 5 days, and they still haven't run the dirt mile. Why not go for a price? And again, take those posts. Look at the 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the dirt mile for an upset chance. Let's go back to see what my handicappers have in race number 6 as we move along here on the Keeneland Look Ahead program. Race number 6 is the Filly and Mare Turf, and this is a race where Nashua is a big favorite in the international bookmakers. Nashua trading, I believe, somewhere just above even money or so with the international bookmakers, but above the curve, I think, is one that you want to keep an eye on here. Above the curve, well drawn in the 4-hole. Nashua's in the 3. But last time out, just finished a nose behind Nashua, and the price is going to be the big swing here. Aiden O'Brien trains above the curve. Johnny Velasquez rides. I love when the Europeans go to the American jockeys, and certainly there was no problem with Ryan Moore, the Englishman, riding for Aiden O'Brien today. They won too. But O'Brien goes to John Velasquez here with above the curve, and I just think that's a fantastic pairing. You know, the American jockeys know these courses like the back of their hand. John Velasquez has ridden probably 500 turf races at Keeneland, over the years. So I think it's a great pairing. Nashua, is she over the top in that this not being the goal of the season? The premier horses in Europe, they're aiming for Arc de Triomphe Day, and she was running on the undercard there in the big Philly stakes. And, the fillies in this race have lost 8 in a row as the favorite in the Filly and Mare Turf. So that's another reason there's been no streak longer currently among any Breeders' Cup division than the 8 straight losses in the Filly and Mare Turf for the favorites. So if there's a race where you want to knock off the chalk, Nashua certainly is credible. But why take, I think she'll be somewhere around 6, 7 to 5. And you might get 4 to 1 on above the curve or 3 to 1. I think it's the better price play. I'm going with above the curve for that reason. In Italian's an interesting one. Let's go back and watch her win. Now give me a little bit of a break. Her win here in the First Lady Stakes. She was absolutely dominant on the front end. She was kind of given the front end by her stablemate who didn't go out with her. Now she goes from the mile in the First Lady Stakes to a mile and 3/16. We know how well the Keeneland horses did today who prepped locally. Let's see if In Italian can't parlay victories back-to-back. Here she was about 4 weeks ago.
In Italian leads off the far turn. Quarter mile to go. Technical analysis. Vigilante's way to the inside. Regal Glory is still 4th on the outside. 1/8 of a mile to go. In Italian leads it by 2. Here comes Regal Glory taking aim, but she's still 2nd. Technical analysis 3rd. In Italian, 2-length lead. 16th to go. Regal Glory is 2nd. In Italian, Regal Glory. In Italian in front. In Italian for Joel Rosario to win it. Regal Glory home 2nd. Going to be close for 3rd. Either Princess Grace or Technical Analysis.
The filly chasing her home there was the big favorite, Regal Glory, for Chad Brown. And so she beat a good one, and they didn't get to her in a gallop out either. In Italian's going to run her race. Now, I did mention about the wind and how that could play if we do get those strong, like 20-mile-per-hour winds. Again, flags to the left favor speed. Flags to the right make the front runners run into the wind. The other horses get to draft in behind them. And it makes it harder for the front runners when the flags are to the right. So it'd be interesting. If we get a wind play, this could be one of the races where that really comes into play, because the question is can she stretch her speed another 3/16 of a mile off that win last time out? We're talking about In Italian here in the Filly and Mare Turf. If we get a day with a really strong wind of their back on down the backstretch, that's going to make it easier on her on the front end. And In Italian could potentially run away with this race in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. If the flags are to the right, that makes her challenge all the more difficult. And we already know the additional distance is the question mark. So if she's got to run into the wind, then that could be one where you really want to keep an eye on it. So tune in for the national anthem. That might be your best deal to see which way the flags are blowing. And anytime you get a look at the track and they, they pan around the beauty shots on television or on the simulcast feed, try to find that out. Tweet at the handicappers who are on track, your Scott Hazeltons, your Gabby Gaudettes. Tweet at them if you're on Twitter and see if you can't get some updated wind conditions and things like that. They'll probably hate me for that I just suggested to 5,000 people that they tweet at them at the same time. But, try to get as much information as you can in real time. If you're at the track, obviously you have an advantage of being able to see the wind speed and direction and feel it for yourself if it's going to be a factor or not. Let's go back and look at the handicapper selectors box here as I scroll around for my video and get that graphic back up for you. Here's the way our handicappers look at the sixth race, the Filly and Mare Turf. Again, I'm going with above the curve. Gabby's on above the curve as well. Most others have a little bit of love in there for that one. In Italian has a top pick. Nashua has a top pick, and Lady Spitespear. Now, Scott is on an island, as I like to say. He's the only one who's got Lady Spitespear, even in the top three. You want to listen to anything you can get from Scott on the air between now and tomorrow to get his reasoning for that, because this could be a live long shot that he's got a little feel for that some of us aren't noticing. But for me, I think it's the 4 or the 3. I think the Canadian filly Moira is really talented. I think she's got a shot in here to hit the board. Again, if the speed and the flags are to the left and the speed is carrying, then in Italian would certainly want to move up into your considerations in there. But above the curve, Nashua, Moira, in Italian, to me, those are the top 4 players in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. Let's go next on the program to the 7th race on the card. The 7th race is the Breeders' Cup Sprint, and the pick 5 is going to start here. Race number 7's got a late pick 5, will be the final 5 Breeders' Cup races. The late pick 5 does not include that 12th race, the local stakes race on the card. So again, late pick 5, not the final 5 races on the card, the final 5 Breeders' Cup races 7 through 11. Breeders' Cup Sprint kicks off here, and this has to be one of the most trustworthy favorites of the entire weekend to me, Jackie's Warrior. And you look across, Jackie's Warrior picked on top by Scott, myself, Gabby, and Kim. Tom Leach is going to try for the upset with American Theorem. Jackie's Warrior, his second pick. Now, I did not think after the loss last time to Cody's Wish, who's running in the dirt mile, by the way, the loss to Cody's Wish by Jackie's Warrior at Saratoga was pretty baffling. I thought that, I think he 15 cents on the dollar, 20 cents on the dollar that day. And so after that loss, you start to think, are there chinks in the armor for Jackie's Warrior? Then you watch the entries for this race start to trickle in. Jack Christopher doesn't end up going in this race, right? Jack Christopher was considering the dirt mile on the sprint. Then he was going to lean sprint. Then he scratched out because of the vet examination situation. There's just no other early speed in this race. I can't believe that there's a Breeders' Cup Sprint with lone speed, but it looks like that to me on paper. I don't see another horse that can run early with Jackie's Warrior. You give the best horse in the race a pace advantage, and they don't give it back. Jackie's Warrior should go wire to wire in this race. I have a lot of respect for American Theorem from off the pace. George Papapadramu is not a name on the national stage that a lot of people are familiar with, but he's had what you would call a breakout year. He's not new to the training game, but he's definitely had his best year in Southern California. He did get a lot of horses from Richie Baltas when that trainer was suspended. He did good things with them. And Papapadramu's got American Theorem in just the peak of his career form right now, coming off big races at Del Mar. He's fresh. He's ready to go. Defending champ in this race is Aloha West. Now, last year at Del Mar, it was a complete meltdown of the pace that included Jackie's Warrior in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. And Aloha West was probably the benefactor of that. But we know Aloha West can run well at Keeneland, ran the Phoenix last year and won it before going to Del Mar. Aloha West can win the sprint again in a repeat, but we'll need some pace help to do it. It's not the same kind of pace situation on paper as it looked last year going into the sprint. Now, I know what happens sometimes in these situations. Everybody has a form. Jocks have it. Owners have it. Trainers have it. Everybody can read the PPs and say, there's no speed in here. Somebody's got to go with Jackie's Warrior, and 3 of them all decide to do it. Next thing you know, you've got yourself a speed duel. That happens when horses are pretty evenly matched up. Jackie's Warrior is just really fast, if not the fastest horse in the country out of the gate on dirt, among the fastest. So I can't imagine, even if 3 or 4 trainers or jocks all see the same thing we do and say, we've got to go, I don't think they're capable. And so Jackie's Warrior, I think, will just be in front of them. And I think that makes him just too tough to beat. He's due some good fortune here in the Breeders' Cup. Again, chewed up in the pace last year. As a juvenile, he ran in the Breeders' Cup, the 2-turn race, the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, a mile and 16th. Route races turned out not to be his deal, and sprints his thing. So he's 0 for 2 at the Breeders' Cup. You could hold last year against him some, because it was his sprint distance. He was the favorite, but that pace was so wicked last year that it took its toll on all the front runners. So I think Jackie's Warrior gets it done. I think he's very short price, and I'm not going to get too creative in here. There are 12 races on the card. There are a lot of good betting opportunities. I do not think the sprint is necessarily one of them, unless the 9-4 exact is going to come back at something in the 20s. If you can give me a $20 plus exacta with American Theorem second, you could certainly talk me into that. Let's go to the 8th race on the card. It's the Breeders' Cup Mile. Race number 8, the miles, got a full field in here. 14 of them, including Domestic Spending in the 14 and farthest post on the outside. Domestic Spending, who has not run since last year's Breeders' Cup. Chad Brown got an epiphany about 3-4 weeks ago, as well as this horse was training for the comeback. Hey, let's just go right to the Breeders' Cup. It's off works. It hasn't happened very often. We do remember DeHaas winning this race, the Breeders' Cup Mile, with 1 race in 2 years' time. But at least that was a prep race at Colonial Downs closer to the event. Domestic Spending has not had a race in a year and comes back in the Breeders' Cup Mile. You'd say you just can't do that, right? First off, it's Chad Brown. He can do whatever he can do on the turf that many others can't do in the United States. He's the best turf trainer in America, and there's very little debate about that in today's game. The other thing is turf miles at Keeneland have long been the place where comeback horses come back and fire their race. For whatever reason, the configuration, the course, the timing of year, whether it's the spring meet or the fall meet, horses coming off long layoffs run extremely well in turf miles at Keeneland. It's almost a bet straight for me when it comes to everyday racing, overnight racing at Keeneland. Now, does that step up and translate to the Breeders' Cup Mile? Probably not. But Domestic Spending is my third choice in this race because he was probably the best turf horse in America when he went to the sidelines last year. In fact, he was the best turf horse in America. I can't pull the trigger all the way to moving him up to the top spot, but I'm going to put him second, and I'm going to put him ahead of Modern Games, who's probably going to be the favorite for this race. But I'm sticking with the Europeans on top here, and I'm going for what I think can deliver us a little bit of a price. The name is Malavath. Malavath is 15 to 1 in the morning line. We already know Malavath can ship to the U.S. and run well. This horse was a flying second last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf as a 3-year-old. And this filly from France is, she's looked good on the track. I've seen her a little bit on video. She's kind of that little pocket rocket, 6 perfections kind of feel. And the 3-year-old fillies have had just such a great success from France here in the Breeders' Cup Mile over the years. You think of the great Goldakova, you think of Mies, you think of 6 perfections. So many 3-year-old fillies have run huge races here this time of year, developing and getting good at the right time. And I think Malavath at 15 to 1 in the morning line is a great play here for the Breeders' Cup Mile at a price. We're looking to get a price here in the mile. The last time they ran the mile at Keeneland, it was a 73 to 1 shot. Order of Australia, who won it. Order of Australia, incidentally, is back in this race. He won't be 73 to 1 this time, but after Aidan O'Brien won 2 races on the Friday card, you might want to give Order of Australia a little bit more love. 12 to 1 in the morning line. From post number 10. Kinross, a horse in here from England you have to respect. Kinross, for me, would line up 4th in my picks. Gabby's got that one picked. Pogo, an interesting pick for Gabby Gaudet in here. A lot of speed from the inside. Pogo showed a lot of speed and tenacity running in England. Jeff Siegel and I do a podcast called It's Official, where we looked at Pogo earlier this week, and he thought Pogo was a horse in our 2-minute handicapping vignettes, where he thought Pogo could be one of the upsetters to watch here at the Breeders' Cup. So 2 handicappers I respect. Gabby, Jeff Siegel, both like Pogo, so you might want to move that one up into your consideration as well. So there are some price chances in here. Modern Games is going to be favored. Kinross is going to be right in there amongst the favorites. I think in the international pools, Kinross might even take a little more money than Modern Games, but I think here in the States, I think Modern Games, because we're familiar with this horse in North America, winning the juvenile turf last year and winning the Woodbine Mile earlier this year that a lot of U.S. fans saw on simulcast. I think the fact that Kinross is unknown because not racing here in the U.S., I think that will tilt the favoritism in this race to Modern Games. Expect Modern Games to go favorite in the mile. Certainly has a big chance to win it, but I'm going for some juicier prices in the Breeders' Cup Mile in a race number 8. Let's go to the 9th race on Breeders' Cup Saturday. This kicks off the late pick 4, final pick 4 on the card, races 9, 10, 11, and that stakes race. It's the Breeders' Cup Distaff, and you see in my key plays, we're looking for a pace player around some of these favorites, right? Jackie's Warrior, Flightline. There's some big favorites between races 7 and 11. So 8, 9, 10, we've got to try to upset some favorites in here to get a little Breeders' Cup bingo going, and I think we can do it in here with Society. She's my top pick, and she's my best bet of the weekend in the Breeders' Cup. I just love her in this spot. I think she's going to be lone speed in a race with a lot of talent. Malathot has one of the best resumes we've ever seen here at Keeneland. Nest is the morning line favorite. Nest is favored in the daily double wagering from the previous day, the Juvenile Fillies Distaff double that we talked about at the head of the show. Nest is a fairly solid favorite in there, but none of us in the public handicappers box is taking the favorite Nest in here. Interesting. We've all got respect for her, and she's in the mix, but there are 3 Malathots on top, and then there's a Clairiere and a Society. And I've got Society for Steve Asmussen. She's a 3-year-old filly who got really good in the Cotillion Stakes, grade 1 for 3-year-old fillies at Parks, and just ran through the screen. She was fabulous on the front end. There's not anybody in this race, I think, that can go with her early. Search Results has some early speed, but I don't think she's fast enough to go with Society, and I think she's going to be ridden aggressively. The Asmussen trainee goes right to the front, plays Catch Me If You Can, and I don't think they catch her. I think a speed pace play. And again, here's one of those for the flags, right? Flags to the left, and you see some of that win play. If we get that, boy, you're even, Society becomes a 4-star play to a 5-star play, or a 5-star play to a go to the ATM machine play, right? If the flags are to the left. If the flags are to the right, maybe you back off a little bit. She's still lone speed, but it's going to be harder, and she'd have to work for it. But I love her in this particular spot. Now, she's got to beat Malathot. I think Malathot are the 2 Todd Pletcher trainees, Malathot and Nest. Malathot is the one for tomorrow. She's coming up into this race great. They work together in company. Malathot looked to be going the better of the 2. She outworked Nest, and Malathot is among Keeneland resumes for fillies, could clinch it as the greatest resume of a filly at Keeneland. Take Charge Lady, I think, has that title now. She's won all the big races, and she won some of them multiple. But you look at Malathot, she won the big race for 3-year-old fillies, the Ashland. She won the Double Dog Dare, which is the big race in the spring for the Distaffers. She won the Spinster, which is the big race at Keeneland for the older fillies and mares. She's run at Keeneland 3 times, and she's won the 3 biggest races at the track. That's an all-time resume. If you had a Breeders' Cup Distaff on top of that, I mean, Keeneland Hall of Fame from Malathot if she comes through and punches this one out, and she may be anyway. But I think she's doing really well. The 1 1/8 distance, I think, is another thing that Malathot kind of is better a little farther. I think 1 1/4 is a really good trip for her. Same way with Nest, right? Nest, the 3-year-old filly. You remember she ran 2nd in the Belmont Stakes, and she's run really well in the 1 1/4 race at Saratoga in the summer. She might even be better a little longer. That's why I like the speed and the brilliance of Society. Those 2 fillies would probably beat her at 1 1/4, no question. 1 1/2 like the Belmont, absolutely. But in this particular case, I think at the 1 1/8 in the Breeders' Cup Distaff, it's all about Society. So 8-1-6 for me in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. And we take a look at my partners around here. Again, 3 Malathots, a Clairiere on top for Gabby Gaudet. Interesting with Clairiere, the reason I don't have Clairiere in my top 3 is that pace scenario. I don't think it's going to be fast. And Clairiere is she is the bigger closer of those 4 major players. Between the 1, 6, 8, and Clairiere, she's going to be farthest back early, probably based on her past running lines. So she's going to have more work to do, Clairiere, in the 9th race, the Breeders' Cup Distaff. To the 10th we go, Breeders' Cup Turf time. Breeders' Cup Turf at 1.5 miles on the grass here at Keeneland. Another big field, 13 entered in this one. I'm not 100% sure I love my pick in here, but I'm going to go with Mishriff. Mishriff, if he would have ran in this race last year, would have been the favorite. He had absolutely spectacular form. He's made about $14 million worldwide. He did not come here last year for the Breeders' Cup Turf. he comes a year later, and he comes off a dull effort in the Arc de Triomphe where, trainer John Goslin's going to give him one more shot here before he retires. Maybe it's sentiment. Maybe it's remembrance of how good Mishriff has been. But remember last year, I mean, he won the Saudi Cup on the dirt, running down Charlatan for Bob Baffert. I mean, this horse was fast enough to run down in Baffert on dirt last year. He's lost a step this year. There's no question about that. But at 1.5 miles on turf, if he's as good once as he ever was, as Toby Keith sings, if he can pull out that effort one more time, Mishriff will be a nice price here. He's 6-1 in the morning line, and I think he's actually going to go off perhaps a little higher than that because you've got 2 in here for Charlie Appleby, Rebels Romance, Nation's Pride. Both of them are going to get bet. People are on to the Applebees at the Breeders' Cup now, obviously. Aiden O'Brien's horses are going to get bet in this race, like Stone Age. You're looking at a horse who's 15-1. He's not going to be 15-1 the way Aiden O'Brien won 2 races today. So I think some of those other horses are going to get bet. Maybe we can get the price to rise on Mishriff. If you're looking for an American, look, a lot of folks have an affinity for Warlike Goddess in this race. Top pick for Tom Leach, for Kim Nelson. I'm not taking Warlike Goddess in my top 3, but there's no knock on her. It's just I think the other horses might be a little bit better than she is. No U.S. filly and mare has won this race on the turf and the Breeders' Cup turf. We've seen European fillies and mares win it. She would be historic if she's able to pull it off at Warlike Goddess. She just has a tremendous resume. I thought her race was last year in the filly and mare turf. I thought she got a bad ride too far back. This year's filly and mare turf is 1 mile and 3/16, and it's shorter. So trainer Bill Mott did not want to go a shorter distance. His option was to send her longer, but now she's got to face the boys. So they beat the boys last time in the Joe Hurst Turf Classic at Belmont to prep for this, but that was a weak field by its historical norms, usually a much stronger race. I just think Warlike Goddess is good, but I don't know if she's going to beat all these good Europeans at 1.5 miles, at their game. So I think she'll run okay. But if the Americans are going to have a shot in here at a price, I think it's Highland Chief. Highland Chief's a horse who ran really well at Keeneland recently at the meet. Graham Motion's horses all ran well during the course of the fall meet. He was the key to my 39-1 long shot in the last race of the Breeders' Cup today, the Juvenile Turf, where Nagarok ran a very good third for us and helped, create that 340-1 trifecta. Motion's horses are all running well. I think if you're looking for a price horse in the Breeders' Cup turf, the 13 Highland Chief coming off a really good run over this course at Keeneland, probably upwards of 20-25-1 against the tops in Europe, 15 in the morning line. But again, I think the Applebees are going to get bet harder, which pushes the price up on everybody else. So that's the way I see the Breeders' Cup turf, that being race number 10. 10th on the card has Broom, a top pick for Aiden O'Brien. That is Scott's top pick in there. I'm going with Mishriff. We've got a couple Warlike Goddess and Nation's Pride, the top pick there for Gabby Gaudette. And again, we told you with the early wagering they had today from the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf to the Juvenile Turf, the favorite in there was Charlie Appleby's horse, but not the one who was favored in the morning line. So it is Nation's Pride, the 3-year-old, who's favored amongst the bettors in that 2-day daily double bet. That's a good sign that horse will go off favored probably at post time. So expect Rebels Romance to be the second or third choice on the tote board, perhaps, based on those double bets. But certainly Nation's Pride is going to get bet harder than expected based on what we see from the 2-day bets from the Juvenile Turf to the Turf. Let's go next to the Breeders' Cup Classic. It's the big one, and all eyes here are on Flightline, folks. I don't have a sneaky good thing to tell you about why Flightline's going to get beat in this race. He's got the light resume, but we know he can travel. He traveled to Belmont. He ran in front of a big crowd there at on Belmont Stakes Day when he won the Metropolitan Handicap. So we know he can travel. He can handle a crowd. We know he can go the 1.25 miles now because he won the Pacific Classic in a good time by 19-plus lengths. There's not a real hole in his armor other than the obvious price. And has he ever faced another horse on the front end as strong as Life is Good? It really comes down to, does Flightline get into a long battle before he puts Life is Good away, and that take a toll on both of them? That's the knock here. There was one thing I thought time-wise that was a little bit interesting here. And this tells me that I don't think the race is going to be a complete blowout. I've mentioned this in some other podcasts, but I'll share it here. In the Pacific Classic, we all raved about the win, 19-plus lengths for for Flightline, and people compared it to Secretariat, 73, Belmont, and some of the big wins by Spectacular Bid, one of the greatest performances we've seen in a long, long time. So I wanted to compare it Breeders' Cup wise, and I went back to last year's Classic, and all I had to do was get back 1 year. Folks, Nick's Go ran just as fast in the Breeders' Cup Classic last year at Del Mar at the same distance. And there's some belief that the Del Mar track in the fall is actually slower than it is in the summer. So in the fall, Nick's Go ran as fast as Flightline did. Nick's Go's margin of victory in last year's Classic was 2 3/4 lengths. It wasn't a 19-length blowout. So if the performances translate from last year's Classic to this year's Classic, and Flightline's Pacific Classics to this year's Classic, I don't think we're looking at a major blowout. I think these horses are going to be competitive with him. I still think he's good enough that he's going to win the race. I just think he's going to win. If you had to tell me over under 5 lengths, I'm playing the under. I don't think he's going to blow him away, but I do think we're going to have a competitive horse race. The duel with Life is Good. Like, here's the 3 scenarios to me I really see in this race in the Breeders' Cup Classic. 1, Flightline wins, and he's up near the front. He puts away Life is Good and goes on to victory. That's the most logical and likely explanation for how the race goes. Second scenario is the 2 of these horses go out and duel each other into the ground. Flightline gets in a tussle for the first time in his career. He won't come off the bid. He's battling with Life is Good. And if that happens, neither one of them wins. Then to me, the 2 most likely closers are Epicenter and Taba. One of those 2 horses comes along and beats the 2 of them for the money. The third most likely scenario is Flightline doesn't fire. He sits and he stalks and he just doesn't have it today. And Life is Good goes wire to wire. That to me is the most unlikely of the 3. I think the most likely is that Flightline is just better. He sits second. He overtakes Life is Good when he needs to. And he goes on to a victory, in the 3-4 length range. And along for second because Life is Good has been challenging him all the way. Life is Good gets tired. And he's not a logical horse to run second in this race. Life is Good probably either wins or you don't find him. And his record on the racetrack kind of, shakes out with that too. He doesn't have many defeats. But if he's going to get beat, he's probably not going to run second. So then you want one of the closers to come along. Do I think there's much betting value in the Breeders' Cup Classic? Absolutely not. I don't really see. Even if you beat, let's say that second scenario, you're going to beat Flightline and Life is Good. And you do it with Epicenter. The price on Epicenter is going to be like 7-2 in here. You want $9 to beat a horse people are comparing to Spectacular Bid? You get a $9 bet on any track in America 15 minutes after the Breeders' Cup Classic is over, and you can find a 7-2 shot that looks more likely to win than beating Flightline and Life is Good in a horse race. So $9 is $9, whether it's the Breeders' Cup Classic or a race at Remington later on Saturday night after the Breeders' Cup. So I don't see that as value, right? So you can say, oh, well, when would you ever get $9 on Epicenter again? You just beat 2 like all-timers to do it. So to me, that's not great value. The way to bet the Breeders' Cup Classic is through the multi-race wagers. Use your opinion. If you like Flightline, bet to him and get to him. And when he wins, you're going to be happy and you're going to close out your multi-race wagers with a winning ticket. If you don't like Flightline, again, do not dive so much into the win pool if you don't like Flightline. This is where you get an epic payout. You get outside the public, as the great late handicapper and tournament player Randy Gallo told me once for Horse Player Magazine. Get outside the public. You got to get outside the public. Well, if you beat Flightline, you're outside the public because everybody's going to have Flightline on their tickets. So if you don't like Flightline and you say, I think Taba's going to win this race, I would put the bulk of my money on pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5s, ending to Taba, because this is how you're going to get a $15,000 payoff for $1. When you beat Flightline, the prices of those multi-race wagers are going to go through the roof. So if you have an opinion that Flightline is the winner, nickel diamond around on exactas aren't going to do you any good. Trifectas aren't going to do you any good. Supers aren't going to do you any good. It's only an 8-horse field. You got to get to, if you like Flightline, you've got to get to him in a daily double, pick 3, pick 4, pick 5. That's the way to play him. If you don't like him, it's still about the double, pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, because those prices are going to go through the roof. So for me, I will not bet 5 cents intra-race on this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. I'll tell you that right now. It's all multi-race wagers coming into it. Now, if you have a horse you love in the 12th race and you want to use Flightline to that one in a daily double and start a double to the last race, then let the math work for you. And maybe you'll get a little bit more on that payoff in the last race than you would just betting the horse straight to win, right? The win to flight line to a horse in the last race might make the double worth twice as much as just betting the horse to win in the last race. So there is the one suggestion where you could start a bet in the Classic if you have a horse you like in the double to the 12th race. Speaking of the 12th stakes race here for $250,000 on the turf, Shanty Sarah was in a race that you saw already today. Shanty Sarah last time was running against In Italian, and they didn't let her run, or technical analysis. They didn't let her run last time, and I think they're going to let her run this time. Chad Brown, I think, has this race surrounded. I think it's the Irish Breds 1, 2, 3 here, though. Shanty Sarah, technical analysis, Wakanaka. That's the way I'm going to send you out on Breeders' Cup Saturday. And if you look at the other public handicappers, it's all about the 2, the 5, and the 7. One little bit of love in there for Delika or 2. But basically 5, 7 with the 2 will get you through any of those multi-race wagers that are going to go and end in the 12th. Just a late pick 4 ending in that 12th. I'll go back and make sure I'm right about that with the big picture. This is why it's good to write it down. But yeah, the pick 5 in race number 7 is going to end in the 11th, all Breeders' Cup. So the only multi-race wager of the pick 4s and pick 5s, and even the pick 6, the Breeders' Cup pick 6, will be races 6 through 11. So if you want to get to that 12th race and leverage an opinion you have in the 12th, you got to start it in race number 9, which is that late pick 4. Again, this is why you map everything out and plan it out, right? Say you handicap and absolutely love a horse in the 12th race. You got to know you're not going to be able to match them up with a lot of different bets. There's not a pick 5, not a pick 6, only that pick 4 that begins in race number 9. So don't sleepwalk and all of a sudden the 10th race is coming up and you remember, oh God, I love this horse in the 12th. What am I going to do to him? You've already missed your chance in the late pick 4. So map things out, write them down, get yourself a little sheet like this, write down when the bets start and keep it with you as you go out through the course of the day. Plenty of past performances pages, a lot to write down, maybe up at the top of your page of your past performances. Make sure you really highlight when wagers are going to start. So when you flip these stacks of 70 past performances or your program pages with these big fields, when you get to that page in your past performances, you're clearly noted at the top what bets are starting or a bet that you really want to play today. This is one of my keys of the day. Organize yourself because there is a lot that can go wrong here throughout the course of the day with a lot of big races and a ton of bets that are crisscrossing all over the map. That's going to wrap it up for the 35th and final time in 2022 doing these Keeneland Look Ahead podcasts. I hope you enjoy. If you caught it late, this will restart at the conclusion of this podcast and you can watch it back. You can also watch it on YouTube or the Twitter handles for Keeneland, Bet Keeneland, and on YouTube, you can certainly get it. Keeneland Fan there on YouTube. On behalf of the folks at Keeneland, I'm Jeremy Plonk for Horse Player Now. If you'd like to pick up our Buzz Report with all the handicapping, betting, and suggested wagers and comments on all 150-plus horses throughout the Breeders' Cup, we had a nice day today. The Buzz Report is for sale at horseplayernow.com. Not giving you a hard sell, just letting you know it's out there if you want to check it out, horseplayernow.com. On behalf of everybody, good luck at the races on Saturday. Enjoy Breeders' Cup Day, and God willing, we'll see you in the spring for more Keeneland action. Goodbye, everybody.